in the pursuit of truth and common sense in an unbelievable world. You're listening to the Right Mind podcast with your host, Todd Schowalter.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Right Mind. I'm Todd Schowalter. Today, my guest is Neil Getzlow. He's a recovering sex addict, among some other addictions, and he's also the author of a new book called Unmasked: Conquering Sexual Sin and Walking in Victory. How you doing, Neil?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on to share my story. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for joining me. Your story, I've read a little bit about you, and I go back into your past. You talk about your addictions, and one of those, an addiction to pornography. You say it began when you were 9 years old. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I was first exposed to porn at the age of 9. There was I remember clearly how it happened. There was this wooded area behind my elementary school, and there was like this carved out area, some logs around a campfire, and all around were these ripped up pages of Playboy magazine, hence the nickname Playboy Forest. And so that's where sort of I got my first exposure. And from that moment on, like it just grabbed hold of my mind, and it really controlled my mind for a better part of the next 40 years.
Okay. Now, when you're addicted, to pornography, for example, and obviously at a young age, how is that similar to being addicted to other substances, whether it's alcohol or drugs? I mean, is there a similar thrill you get or a rush you get? Okay. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. In fact, I've talked to a few as I've been sharing my story. I've come across other addicts, and specifically like addicts for drugs, and we both share that we have like the same experience where it is this. You've got this. For me, it was like a hole I had to fill in my heart, but like there was something I needed to medicate myself on. Right, I needed something to help with my anxiety. Depression, lack of, love from family, all that, like looking for any escape, any way to sort of medicate myself. And for me, pornography was the start of that. And I would use it and I'd get that rush and I'd fill myself up, but it was just a temporary fix. And then soon, then whether it was an hour later, whether it was a week later, whatever, it just was never enough, and you kept going back and back and back, and soon it wasn't what you were doing wasn't enough, and then so that's what happened to me. So as I got older, the pornography wasn't enough for me. I had to go to stronger and harder stuff, which meant ultimately finding strip clubs, adult theaters, and then ultimately that addiction finally morphed into this world of paying women to have sex with me via prostitution. And that's how my addiction went from just what people would consider innocent pornography up into that.
Okay. Now, when this all began, again, you were at a young age. What did this go on throughout your high school years? How did that affect your relationships moving on? The older that you became, rather.
Yeah, I mean, it was it seriously impacted my relationships. Like I didn't know how, because for me, like I didn't have a lot of love as for my family as a little kid, so I was always searching for that love, and I would use the pornography. To me, like I would see those images. That's what I thought love was. It was just this act being played out in a magazine or in a video, and I would try to sort of replicate that in the real world, and I would always go bounce from one relationship to the next. I never knew how to treat women. I always objectified them. And so, yeah, it severely cramped sort of trying to have any real relationship, growing up and in my adult years and into my first marriage, which ended in a divorce because of this addiction. And then, very nearly crushed my second marriage. But fortunately, that did not happen.
Okay, now going back to your first marriage, I mean, and even your second marriage, I mean, were your wives, were they aware that you were addicted to pornography, or was this all secret?
Yeah, it was all secret, and that's why I titled my book "Unmasked."
Okay.
I had this mask on that I was wearing for most of my life. I didn't tell anybody about what I was doing with pornography or what I was doing, with the sex addiction. Nobody knew. All
Okay.
they saw was this mask, nice little mask of a hardworking guy, father, husband, good all around nice guy. But
Mhm.
underneath was kind of that evil I was bringing into my life. And so they didn't have any idea. And I would say for first marriage, it really just, it didn't manifest itself until right at the end. I was able to control it. Now I was still looking at porn regularly. And that does, sort of desensitize you to being, to things that you might do with your partner.
Mhm.
And then with my current wife, yeah, we we were married for about 8 years. So when I finally came clean to her in 2020 about my actions, that's when I kind of took off the mask for her. But she had, she did not have any idea of what
How
was
did she
going on.
react? I mean, it had to be, I was she suspicious, or was it a shock? Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was yeah, she was definitely surprised, of course, and I think she had some suspicions because
Okay.
I definitely would act like there were things that I would do to kind of give her signs. Like I would always go out with my friends all the time, leaving her home alone. We'd go to watch a sports event,
Okay.
watch the ball game at the local bar. I left her home a lot. There were certainly opportunities there. I worked from home for the last 5 years of my of what I was doing, and so there was plenty of opportunity to do that. I was extremely protective of my personal information. She did not have any access to my computer. She didn't have access to my phone. Like I kept that phone like like attached to my hip,
Hmm.
permanently because I knew if she got into that, she would find out all these secrets and this double life I was leading would be blown up. I tried so hard, desperately, to protect those and created this web of lies um, that finally led me to a hotel room in Chicago on a business trip in February of 2020, and I had set up an arrangement to meet a prostitute in
Hmm.
this room. Went to the appointment, getting ready to leave, and the bedroom door in this hotel room, the second bedroom opened up, and out walks this guy. He looks like he is an offensive lineman from the Chicago Bears, about
Hmm.
6'5", 300 pounds, and but I noticed he's holding his cell phone in his hand, and on it is my wife's contact information and social media information. And he's like, "You're going to have to pay us more money, or we're going to call your wife."
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So that sort of was set, and I like to say that was the first of three encounters I had with God over the course of 6 weeks that sort of turned my life around and got me out of this this nightmare that I was living in. And I did manage to, I paid $900 extra, get out of that hotel room, which looking back was a small price to pay for getting out of there alive because I wasn't sure that was going to happen at
right.
the time. And, made it, went on with my day, went through all my business meetings again, had this mask on so nobody knew, I just been blackmailed by a prostitute. Nobody knew that.
Well, that has to also, I mean, other addictions. I mean, somebody, if you're an alcoholic or a
Mhm.
drug addict, I mean, a lot of times there are clues. It's kind of obvious. Well, he's got a problem or
Yeah.
something like that. That's got to be a heck of a lot of pressure. I mean, to live with day by day to keep up. I would think like this whole facade. That's got to be exhausting. It sounds exhausting.
It is. In fact, that's one of the things, that I learned as I went to talking to a counselor sort of in my recovery through this.
Hmm.
One of the things he kind of helped me unpack was that, and I was not a very good communicator in any of my relationships, but especially with my current wife, because you're right. I had this whole book of lies that I was writing,
Hmm.
and every conversation I had to make sure I was ticking off making sure the lies were adding up because and it finally toward the end it got so like there's so many it took all my brain power to keep him focused. Like I
Hmm.
could never have a really in-depth conversation with my wife because I was just so worried about saying something that would kind of start to unweave all of this.
I got you. So now this is okay, because now we're in 22. You're saying this is in 2020. Okay. So it's not that long ago. So when everything finally went down, I've talked on other shows to other people that have suffered from addiction. Sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, often there's a point where you've hit rock bottom. Was that time in the, that incident in the hotel room? Was that the time you hit rock bottom?
No, that you would believe, you think it would have been rock bottom. I mean, that's pretty bad, and I would say like 3 days after that, that incident, this would have been March 1st, 2020 at 9:30 p.m. I did get a text from this couple saying, you've got 15 minutes to pay us more money or we're going to call your wife. And then I just sort of like, I blew it off. I was like, there's no way, like, why would they do that? Once they called her, like, I was not going to pay him any more money. So I just thought they'd get bored and moved on. But
well, how did they get your name? Were you going by your real name at this point?
You get, so now I've done this a lot.
Right.
I know better, but one of the mistakes you make is, sometimes men in my position will use like alternate phone numbers, cell phones, burner phone, as they say.
Yeah. Okay.
I use my real phone, so it was tied to my name, and a simple Google search, and they were able to track her down and get her contact information. And
wow.
And they ended up calling her, and
they did call her. They called your wife.
That's how this all came undone. Is that they actually called my wife and told her what I was up to in Chicago, and of course, my wife was, of course, incredibly upset. But what I did what any good addict would do, trying to protect her story. I lied when she confronted me. I said I'd never done this before, which was totally not true. I'll never do it again, which we'll discover here, which was I tried to do it again, and that I didn't want to get a divorce. And so about 6 weeks later is really where this transformation happens. I had set up an appointment to go meet someone in Kansas City that I had an arrangement with. I left the house. My wife was home. And I did this all on my laptop. Normally, like I said, I protect my information. I lock my laptop. Well, I left to go to this appointment, and then my wife immediately got on my computer and it was unlocked. And then she started texting me. She took screenshots from my computer, sent them to me on my way to this appointment. Like, what the heck is going on?
Right.
And of course, I immediately turned around, and frankly, I got home. I don't remember what I had told her, but it was a bunch of lies and stuff that she obviously did not believe, rightly so. And then, before we went to bed that night, she told me, she was like, if you want to save this marriage, you have to ask God for help. That's the only way you're going to do it.
Okay. Well, and that leads us to again, well, you set up. That's quite a story. I mean, being extorted. I mean, the blackmail and with your wife. I mean, and it's got to be. I mean, was it almost? I mean, building up to what you were saying here, was it almost like a relief that this was kind of finally out?
Well, So this is the rock bottom part, right?
Right.
Here.
Okay. Sure.
So,
right.
So the next day, I woke up. Amy had left. So when I woke up, she was already gone from the house. Obviously, she went to go blow off some steam. And so I thought, well, this is a good time as any to pray. And that's what I did. And I just said, God, I don't know. I'm stuck here. Like, my life is unraveling. There's no way, there's no bottom, it seems. I need help. Send me a sign that help is there. And as soon as I finish that prayer, the garage door pops up and it's Amy. And Amy really is the key to this whole story.
Okay.
And she came in, I told her that, I prayed, I want to work on our marriage, which she, reluctantly agreed. And then a couple hours later, we're sitting on the couch, and this is third and final time God hits me in the head. And this is what kind of let me just exposed everything. It was Amy's turn to get a message. She got a message on Facebook, an instant message from some guy we don't know. And all it said was, do you know a Neil Getzlow? Now, I don't know what happened, but at that exact moment when she read me that message, I felt this overwhelming feeling of, I need to confess everything. And the way I describe it in the book was, I threw up all over the floor of our marriage at that exact moment and told her everything. And to your point, like I felt instantly relieved.
Mm-hmm.
I I got this story. I just like after you get sick, right? You like,
Right.
oh, I feel so much better, which I
Right.
did. But okay, what's Amy's reaction going to be? And this
Right.
is where, this is the part where it sort of um, changed my life, changed our marriage. I told her everything that I've been doing for the past 6 years of our marriage, and she looked up at me and she's like, Jesus forgave me for my sins. How can I not forgive you for yours? I forgive you.
Hmm.
And from that moment on, I have not looked at pornography since. It's been, coming up on 2 years now. I have not visited a prostitute, have not been tempted to have sex outside my marriage. In fact, I would say my old life is completely gone. I've stopped drinking. I've stopped doing drugs. I've stopped partying. It's my story looks so much different than what it did, just 2 years ago. And I credit God for that. God gave me the roadmap, the helping hand out of this pit, and then showed me the steps I needed to take on my own to sort of put these things behind me, to rebuild my marriage, my relationships, my family, just everything. And
Sure, sure. And
here we
one
are
thing
today.
that you touch upon in your book, I believe, is that prior to all this, you were an atheist, weren't you? I mean,
Yeah.
you weren't a church going, God loving person, were you?
No, and that's the thing that it's amazing to me. Like, and so let me give you a little bit of backstory of why Amy told me that, and why Amy was able to forgive me. So when we got married 10 years ago, neither of us were believers. And so Amy grew up Catholic, but she didn't have, any sort of connection to the church. I actually grew up Jewish, Jewish family, Jewish friends. But I like to say I was in it for the culture and the comedy, nothing about the religious part of it, and had no relationship with God whatsoever. And
Right.
considered myself an atheist at the time this all went down. So, but 3 months after we got married, Amy told me that she had become a born again Christian. Now, imagine I'm Jewish by culture, atheist by faith, and now my wife has just told me I'm married to a born again Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking, you've got to be kidding me here. Like, I didn't sign up for this. And yeah, she prayed for 8 years for me to finally get saved. And um, I never would have, like, if you sat me down today with the old version of Neil, he'd look at me like, you've lost your mind. Like,
Sure. And so it gets to a point, going back to this moment where you've hit rock bottom, where you almost have to say, and again, it goes back to other stories of addiction that I've heard and talk to people about, is that you get to the point where you're just out of control. You say, I can't do this anymore. If either you help me or I'm done. I mean, please. I mean, so was that the kind of
yes.
situation? Okay. So you just turned everything over. You said, look, you got to take care of this. Is that how it was?
Yeah, I had no choice. I was out of control. I was taking more and more risks, hence how I ended up in a hotel room in downtown Chicago at 7 a.m. Like, and I'm convinced if Amy hadn't forgiven me, and we surely would have obviously gotten divorced. And I know I would have continued to go darker and deeper into this hole. And I don't think I'd be here today. I really don't. I was taking too many risks, doing too many things that would have ultimately ended in my demise, one way or the other.
Okay, so now once God came into your life and made this transformation, I assume it wasn't just like, well, thanks, now I'll be on my way now. I appreciate your help. I mean, I assume now there's some daily conversation and connection there, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I like to say, I kind of canceled my culture before the culture canceled me, in a way. Like, I got rid of everything in my old life. Like, all the temptations, which was, like Netflix and cable TV. I got rid of all my sports subscriptions, because for me, like, sports was an addiction too, because I watched nonstop. I got rid of all that stuff. And for me, I replaced it with reading the Bible every day, with praying, with going to church. I'd never gone to church before. Now I've gone just about every week for the past 2 years. Like I've took all the junk food out of my life, because that's what I like to say is, like whenever we want to go on a diet and lose weight, we always, what do? We stop eating junk food.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the same thing with your mind, right? When you want to get your mind healthier, what do? Well, cut out the junk of your mind. Get off social media, stop watching Netflix 15 hours a day, and focus on the good things. Fill yourself up with the good things. And for me, that worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have time to think about any of that other stuff because I'm I'm in a relationship with God, and that's filling up my time.
Well, going back now, a lot of times, I've heard as far as situational things with addiction to substances is usually there's a deeper root there, either that's covering up or something that happened in your past or something that you're still dealing with. It's almost like covering something to a temporary fix for something much deeper. Now, in your journey with God and with your wife, that's Amy, I believe you said her name is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. In that journey over the last 2 years, have you had to look back and say, what you mentioned when you were 9 years old and a chance meeting, something, some magazines and things like that. But do you think there is something that led you to all these addictions that you've had to uncover?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I would say, like I said, God helped me. He gave me the hand up and he showed me the path, but I still had to walk it out myself. And
Sure.
one of the first things I did was get myself a counselor to talk to and to unpack some of this stuff to say, why do I have so many of these destructive behaviors? What am I trying to fill up my heart with that I can't seem to fill it up? Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember the very first conversation I had with my therapist, the very first question, he goes, Neil, what's the first thing you had to remember you had to learn how to do as a little kid? It's like, wow, that's a pretty good question. And then that's like the light bulb went off in my head. It's like, I had to learn how to be alone. My parents, so I'm 9 years old. My parents got divorced. I moved in with my mom, moved away from all the kids I had grown up with to this new school where I didn't know anybody. I'd walk to the bus stop and home from the bus stop alone every day. My siblings had already moved out of the house. So I was the typical latchkey kid of the 80s
Mm-hmm.
with all this time alone. And in my mom's bedroom, she had these two nightstands on either side of her bed. And on those nightstands were stacks of Playboy and Penthouse magazine. And so that's what I learned to do, to be alone, to medicate myself, thinking, and it was a shame cycle is how this started.
Right.
And I think to myself, I'm alone. Nobody loves me. I need to fill up this hole in my heart. I'm going to do that by looking at this pornography. Mm-hmm. And I look at the pornography. I feel good for a minute, but then I feel this overwhelming sense of shame and guilt. And then I think to myself, well, this is why nobody loves me. This is why I'm alone. And then the cycle just repeats itself and manifests itself in many different ways. And it did that literally for the next 40 years of my life. I would be in that same cycle of doing something, to fill up this hole in my heart that I never could, feeling guilty about it, and explaining, well, this is why nobody loves me. And it wasn't
it sounds almost, it doesn't almost, it is. It sounds like a very lonely addiction. Alcoholics, they hang out with their other drinking buddies, and addicts, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but sex, porn addicts, things like that, I don't think that's an open group where they, that seems very isolated and secretive. Yeah. So that sounds very lonely.
Yeah, because again, this is not something that you're going to be talking with your group of friends.
Right.
It's like, hey, I just went out and paid someone to have sex with me. It's not something you're going to talk about. So yeah, it is very lonely. It is something that I kept bottled up.
And you think that goes back to your childhood from being alone, and that's just how you coped. Okay.
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
Did you eventually, were you very social later on? Did you have a lot of friends and things like that, or were you pretty isolated?
I had a core group of friends throughout different times of my life, but I was always the kind of the quiet one.
Okay.
I consider myself an introvert, really. And so I really got my energy from being alone. Right. Yeah, and filling up, on that. But I did enjoy, being out with friends and that kind of thing. But again, those relationships sometimes would lead me to destructive behaviors. And I would say, over the past couple of years, the The people that are now texting me on my cell phone are much different than the people who were in my life just 2 years ago. A lot of those
Sure.
people fell away
Oh,
for not a sinister reason. I think some of them just said Neil's on a new path. We need to let him go do his thing.
sure.
Um,
Right.
but definitely have a new set of friends these days.
Well, and that's a good thing. But
Yeah.
that led you eventually now on, it's only been a couple of years, but you now have a book out. Again, it's called Unmasked.
Yeah. Good deal.
Conquering sexual sin and walking in victory. Tell us a little bit about that. What was that, something that was just a natural progression? You felt, I got to get this all down on paper, or where did your wife Amy help you move towards this, or how did that all come about?
Yeah, and we talked about this a lot before we started writing it, because that's one of the things I get asked a lot is, why are you out talking so publicly about a very dark part of your life? And which is a great question. And Amy and I talked about it. Like, we want to make good. We want to bring some good to this story where it was filled up with so much evil. And so we just said, we want to share our story. We want to help. For me, I want to help other men that might be in a position who are addicted to pornography, and it's impacting their relationships, whether they know it or not. And I want to. Amy wants to help women who are on the other side. And how can we help restore marriages? I think too often in this world, it's so easy for people to get divorced. My therapist said, yeah, in a situation like this, 99 out of 100 people or 100 couples likely would have been ended in divorce,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
there's just no way to get over it. So we set out to write this book as a way just to help people. And but also it was good therapy for us, right? Like, I'd finish a chapter and then I'd let Amy read it and let her provide her feedback and input and get her thoughts on it. And so it really just helped bring us together too, and helped accelerate rebuilding the trust, because it's important to point out,
Right.
Amy's forgiveness was the absolute key to this story, but her forgiveness did not absolve me from any of the responsibility or accountability for my actions.
Right.
I still had to take accountability for those actions, and I had to literally walk the walk to show Amy I am a changed individual. And we had to do a lot of things to help rebuild that trust. And that's kind of what I explain in the book, is there are some things you can do to build that trust back. It is possible.
You're right, and that's got to be the hardest thing. Now, did you have or do you have children that were affected by this? I mean, were they aware of everything that was going on?
So our children are, between us, we have 5 boys. They're all 18 and above.
Okay.
So they didn't really know. They didn't really know anything up until really the point the book came out. I was like, well, you probably ought to read this and
Sure.
and see what happens. But it's interesting though. Like, I do recall a time, maybe 6 years ago, we caught one of our stepsons looking at pornography on the family iPad.
Right.
And it was really incredibly hard for me to address, because I didn't know how to address it, frankly. Because again, I'm dealing with this illness myself. How do I address it beyond saying, "Oh, you shouldn't look at that"? But I don't think I handled it in the way that I should have. And again, it just pornography just messes with your mind. And
Well, and again, it's like any addiction, I would
yeah,
assume, where the chemicals react a certain way, and
for sure.
you get a certain endorphin or some type of stimulant, and that becomes harder and harder to please after a while. So we're down to the last few minutes here, and I want to tell people where they can get your book. But your book, is it a spiritual book? It's obviously been a spiritual journey, but is it? You obviously give thanks to God, and He pulled you out of this along with your wife. When people read your book and they figure out, or find out rather, how you went, do you use your methods to do the same thing for things that they're suffering from?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I do lean on kind of my journey to faith in here, and talk about just how I got to this position, and sort of growing up, the issues I had. But I also put in here, I think there are the things that I did. I think are things, whether you're have faith or not. I think there are things that everybody can do to sort of reset your mental health. And given that we're in the pandemic still, like over the past 2 years, how many people we know that are suffering, that their anxiety is out of control and depression? It's, mental health right now is so hard, and especially for teenagers and kids who are, not been able to go to school, that kind of thing. And, they have access to a lot of things in their cell phones that I never did.
Oh, it's a different world. It's a different world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are absolutely things in this book that you can do regardless whether you have a relationship with God or not.
That leads me to a final question now. When people read your book, what do you want them to take away from it? What's your goal? What do you hope that when they close the cover, what do you hope that they feel, or what do you want their next steps to be?
I just want people to know, like, there is hope out there, right? Like you may be in a situation where you feel like you are at a dead end and there is no way out. But there absolutely is a way out. For me, it started with God. My wife would always challenge me that says, what have you got to lose? And I look back on it now, it's like, right, what do I have to lose? Like if I'm right, well, then everything I've done doesn't really matter. But if Amy's right, then I have everything to gain. Sure. And so, it's just, I just say, don't give up. Like, there are people out there that love you, that care about you, that want to help you. But you got to take those steps. You got to make the U-turn and start walking. And again, for me, God pointed me in the right direction and gave me a path. And I encourage you, just ask for help, whether it comes in the form of God, whether it's your best friend, parents, whoever. Seek help and you will find it, and you will get the direction you need to turn your life around. Because if it can happen to me, the most cynical atheist in the world up until 2 years ago, right. I promise you can find a way out yourself.
Oh, God does great things. I'm speaking that from the heart myself.
Yeah.
I mean, not in your situation, but
sure, of course.
It saved me from a lot of things myself. I certainly couldn't agree more. Well, Neil, tell us where we can get your book. Is it on Amazon?
It is on Amazon. It's also at my website, neilgetzlow.com. And I will say, if you go to my website and check it out.
We'll put that on the screen and also in the descriptions. Yeah. So awesome. It's your website and Amazon. Okay. And again, the name is Unmasked: Conquering Sexual Sin and Walking in Victory by Neil Getzlow. Any final words you'd like to add about that? Or it's fascinating. I mean, wow. I mean, I have so many more questions to ask, but just No,
I just thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the chance to share my story. I hope it brings encouragement to other people. Again, it is a dark story, but I will just say, like, my marriage today is the marriage I've always wanted. I am married to my best friend, finally. So just don't give up in your relationships and things you've got going on.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and again, you just must feel so much lighter. I mean, it's like, yes. Reading this all. Oh, wow. Just telling you hearing your story, I thought, my God, it sounds like you're suffocating almost. I couldn't even, it made me claustrophobic. So, good for you, Neil. That's a fascinating story. I can't wait to read your book. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Todd.
Okay, everybody. Well, thank you for joining me also. I'm Todd Schowalter, and you've been watching or listening to Right Mind. And remember, if you don't have a right mind, you don't have a mind at all. Till next time, bye-bye.
This has been the Right Mind Podcast with Todd Schowalter.